campaign for Britain to leave the EU, and he joins us from our Westminster studio. Morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning.
What's your feeling? Which way do you think it's going to go today?
Nobody knows. I was in government for 6 years as a Secretary of State in the Cabinet. Innumerable cases ended up in the Supreme Court, and we were never able to tell which way they were going to go. Quite often we were surprised, and on a number of occasions I can remember we were told, definitely we've lost the case, it will have earth-shattering repercussions, and then we found we'd won it. So it really is a matter of utter secrecy, and they're not telling anybody. They haven't even told the government, as I understand it. So today will be a surprise to everybody, I expect.
OK. Let's just talk then hypothetically. If it did go against the government, I'm sure you are in some ways preparing for that. What is the immediate impact?
Well, actually, there are two levels of impact. The first is to do with triggering Article 50, and the second is, I think, the bit that often goes missing in these discussions, the wider constitutional implications of a clash between what essentially is the powers of Parliament and the powers of the Supreme Court. Who is supreme in this matter? If we just deal with the Europe issue, actually, I don't think it will have a massive effect in terms of timings, because even if we had to put a bill through both houses, I'm pretty certain that it would be very, very simple. One, at most two clauses, and time would be allotted to get it through both houses. So I suspect, without too much doubt, the Prime Minister will reach her deadline of triggering Article 50 by the end of March, and the opposition and most of the majority of parliamentarians have said they're not going to block it outright. The other issue is a bigger issue, I think, as I say, which hasn't really been discussed, which is this is a moment where even someone like Lord Judge, Igor Judge, who's no longer with us, but was the Lord Chief Justice, has criticised in the past the Supreme Court for straying into what he believed to be Parliament's position. It's generally been accepted it is not the right of judges to tell Parliament how to go about its business, that Parliament will decide that, whether they have acts of Parliament, whether they call the government to account. This is right on the edge of Supreme Court telling Parliament how, not just that they should, but how to do their business. So the question will be, do they just support the High Court in saying that Parliament should have a vote, or do they go further and say Parliament has to enact legislation? And that would be an enormous step into the territory marked the supremacy of Parliament.
Are you saying that that sort of, in your view, might trigger a constitutional crisis in some ways?
Well, I think it is already in that territory right now, in the sense that this is really the marginal debate about who is supreme. In our constitution, it's always been the case that the elected body, Parliament, is supreme, and the courts essentially assess what Parliament has decided and decide whether it's workable or not workable and whether changes need to be made, and they will tell Parliament that's the case. I think here is where the debate exists, and if it wasn't about the European Union, I think it would be arguably the more interesting debate, which is, what's going to happen? This judgment isn't just have a vote. We had a vote before Christmas, and overwhelming, over 370 members of the House of Commons voted majority to trigger Article 50 in the timescale. So this is actually, do they stray further than that and say that's not good enough, you have to go further, in which case they are really telling Parliament what to do, and that's a big issue.
Can I talk about something else, if I may?
Yeah.
The Prime Minister, we know, is due to go to America later this week. We've heard President Trump saying, buy America, hire American. Where does this leave the UK in trade negotiations?
Actually, I think that if you very carefully sift through what that is President Trump and his advisors are saying, I think you start to get a clearer picture about what he means. I think where the President is concerned about what has happened, he thinks, with various trade agreements where American companies have offshored a lot of production. And that has left areas, swathes of the United States. I don't know if you go there much, but I have been to some of these, what they call the Rust Belt territories, where there is real problems, poverty, difficulty, high levels of unemployment. And what's interesting at the moment, everyone goes on and on about how American unemployment has fallen to below 5%. That's true. But there is a much bigger problem in the United States, which we don't have here, which is that the proportion of those of working age who are now working has not been lower pretty much since the Second World War. It's down at around 68, 69%. Here in the UK, we are at record high levels at nearly 76% of our working age in work. So there's a huge gap between the numbers who are of working age in work and those who could be in work. And that's the bit, I think, where the Trump administration is saying this is simply not good enough, and they have a point. So they'll be looking at competition in terms of what they call the low-wage economy. That's not really about the UK. The UK will be a natural fit for them in terms of trade at high-level financial services, a lot of high technology stuff. We compete at pretty much the same level.
Iain Duncan Smith, thanks very much for your time here on Breakfast this morning.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.